Hello, this is Mrs. McCullough. Today's lesson is the very last lesson in this series about how readers make inferences. Say that word with me, inferences. You should know it really well by now. So let's look at the anchor chart. Readers make inferences and they explain them in writing. So many times, writers do this all in one sitting. Oh, we've been breaking it down over the last couple of lessons, doing a little bit of the reading and making inferences, and then a little bit of the writing. But most of the time, people don't do it like that. They actually read, have thoughts, and write about those thoughts all at the same time. So what I want us to review is how readers make those inferences by first reading the text, having a question, then collecting those details, putting them together with the thinking voice, having thoughts, looking for patterns or relationships, and then they have the inference. It happens in that order. But when you're writing, you flip the order. When you're writing, you first write your inference in a sentence. Then you have some of those details. Which details best support your inference? Which details really helped you figure it out? And so those would be the details we would put in the next sentence with a period, and then another sentence with a period. So you need at least two detailed sentences to really prove that this supports your thought. So that's why it becomes evidence, because it supports the thought that you had, which, remember, your thought is not directly stated by the author. It's something you figured out on your own. So in today's lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to read a passage. We're going to collect details, think about them, make an inference. Then we're going to write our inference, pick which details best support it, and then we'll write that sentence with the details that turn into evidence, and then we'll have our second sentence that have details that support it. Okay, so how many sentences are we going to write? 3. That's right, 3 sentences. So let's get started. Today's passage is one that's actually what they would call like a riddle. And so we have to figure out what's going on in this passage. So let's read it together. She knocks on the door and then comes in and asks the patient to explain his symptoms. She checks the patient's heart, breathing, ears, and nose. Then she asks the patient to say, "Ah," while she looks into his mouth. What is her job? Okay, so we've done the first 2 steps. We've read the text and we've read the question. And so now we need to collect details from the reading voice. And remember, the reading voice is green. So we're going to collect details on the green sticky notes. So as I go back in and I'm looking at the first sentence, something that she's doing, that's what I'm really trying to pay attention to. If I want to know what her job is, I need to look closely at what she is doing. And so when she first comes in, she knocks on the door. So I'm going to add that to our inference silhouette. Now remember, these details go outside the head because they come from the text. They come from the author. So she knocks on the door and then she actually comes in. And she asks the patient to explain his symptoms. So patient. Now that's a word that kind of clues me in on who's visiting her in her job. It's called a patient. And asks him to explain symptoms. Okay. Whoops. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? Miss McCullough didn't get it pushed on there very tight. Okay, what else does she do then? Well, she checks some things. Oh, I know why it doesn't stick, because there was a glue stick kind of thing up there. 1 second. So she asks him to explain his symptoms. She checks his heart. She checks his breathing. She checks a lot of things, doesn't she? She checks the nose. So when I go back in and I look at all of those details in the sentence, I'm noticing, and the ears. Okay. And then she looks into his mouth and she asks him to do what? Say, ah. That's what she does. Okay. So as I'm looking at those details and I'm starting to look for patterns, think about things that go together, that's when I start doing that thinking in the head. And so as I'm looking at this, so she knocks on the door and she actually comes in. And so that makes me think that whoever is visiting her is actually in a room, in a separate room away from her because she's coming in. Okay, so then she asks the patient. Now, patient, it could be the patient's in the room, but she asks the patient about symptoms. And symptoms is a key word. I'm thinking symptoms means something is not right. Because if you were having a good day, they wouldn't call them symptoms, right? You'd just be feeling fine. Okay, so I'm thinking something's not right. So then if I look at these couple of ones together, I'm wondering about, okay, so the heart and then the breathing, right? And you know what doctors use when they're doing that? They use like a stethoscope, right? And so I'm thinking that this person is listening in. And I'm already starting to figure it out. Are you? Because now if I think about they're listening and then they check the nose and the mouth and the ears, I know. Looks inside body parts. You're dying to say it. What is she? She's a doctor, right? Lots and lots of clues that let us know that she was a doctor. So that was a pretty easy inference for us to have. But even when it's easy, we've got to go through the steps so that we can use those details to help us write our response. So the first thing that we write in our response is what? The inference, right? The pink. So that's going to be our first sentence. So no worries, I'll take that off. That'll be our first sentence. And then I have to have a sentence with some details that turn into evidence to really support that she's a doctor. So as I look at those details, I'm starting to think through this. And I'm cluing in here. I think this gave me the biggest clue when it said patient and symptoms, right? When it was just talking about knocking on a door and coming in, well, maybe that's the principal knocking on the door and coming in, right, to your classroom. But so I wasn't quite sure. I don't think that was the biggest obvious thing that clued me into this being a doctor. But the patient and explaining the symptoms, I think that really clued me in. Then if I think about some of the other things that are here, so checking the heart and checking the breathing, I was already imagining the stethoscope. I think I even said a doctor uses a stethoscope. So those were the big clues. Yeah, other people can check your ears and your nose and your mouth for different things, but those were really the big clues. So let me move this out of the way and let's get started with our written response. So the doctor, that's our inference. That goes first, remember, on this anchor chart. The inference is always the first sentence. And then we have to put some clues together in our next sentence. What details would really give us a lot of evidence to support it being a doctor? Or patient and symptoms, definitely. And then you can't have just one sentence. You've got to have two. And so let's put these two together down here, the breathing and the heart, right? Because they use that stethoscope that we talked about to really listen to you. Okay, so when we are working on our written response, we need to write this in a sentence, a complete thought. Remember, there's a period after each one of these, so it's always a complete thought. And so I don't want to just say doctor, right? I want to say something like, she is a doctor. And that'd be fine. But because in the sentence, it actually asked me for her job, I'm going to use that in the question. Her job is a doctor. I could say she is a doctor. That would be fine, but I like using some of the words from the question. Okay, so now let me see. How would I put this together? So her job is a doctor, and she asked the patient to tell about his symptoms. She asked the patient what his symptoms are, right? Something like that. So she asked the patient, and since that came right out of the text, I'm going to put it in quotes. She asked the patient to tell about his symptoms. And symptoms, that's really telling me there's something wrong. Something's just not right if you've got symptoms, okay? But then we've got 2 more details down here. And so we need another sentence. Then she checks his heart and his breathing. So I'm going to put checks his heart and breathing. I'm going to put that in quotation marks, okay? Because that came right out of the text that we were reading. See, easy peasy mac and cheesy. This is so simple. Do we have 3 sentences? Her job is a doctor, period. She asked the patient to tell about his symptoms, period. Then she checks his heart and his breathing, period, which the period should actually be. Anyway, you get the idea. It should be inside the quotation marks, okay? So, yeah, we have 3 sentences, and that's what we need at this stage for our written response. Now, you can watch me do it all day long, but you're only going to get better if you actually get to try it out. So, while I'm getting it set up, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to read the next passage. Go ahead, I'll leave it on the screen for you. Just read the next passage to yourself. Okay, did you read the question too? No, I know. You're like, Mrs. McCullough, these passages are so easy. There's a reason why they're easy. I know your brain is already doing this in your head. Your brain is already kind of collecting the details, putting it together, thinking about what makes sense, and poof, you just want to shout out the inference to me. I know that's what you want to do. But here's the thing. What we're working on is actually a routine. And we've got to get really good at this routine so that you can see what the steps are. Because what happens as you move throughout the school year, the text, it's going to get harder. It's going to get harder and harder and harder. And by the time you get to the end of the school year, maybe you have to take a big test. And then you need this routine. You need to be able to understand the steps. Okay? So, what are the steps? Read the text, read the question. Okay, so just in case, let me read it. I'll be the reading voice. You guys follow along. He gets out 2 slices of bread. He opens a drawer to find a knife. He opens a jar and sticks the knife in to scoop out some peanut butter. He spreads it on 1 slice of bread and then puts the other slice on top. What is he doing? Okay, no. Don't shout it out at me. Okay, that's the first 2 steps. But remember, now we have to collect details. Collect details around the head. So look at the first sentence. What would be some details or a detail that you would pull out that's really important to understand what he's doing? Yeah, that's exactly what he is doing. He's getting 2 slices of bread. So I wrote that just in some phrases, not the whole sentence. We're not copying the whole sentence. We never do that when we're just collecting details, okay? So see how it's just the most important words. Okay, what else? Look at the next sentence. What would be the most important detail out of there? Drawer? Is that big of a deal? Knife? He uses this knife a lot, doesn't he? So I think that is a pretty big deal. He gets a knife. Okay, then what? Yeah, there's a couple of different pieces in that next sentence. What phrase do you think we should put down? Opens a jar. Okay. Sticks the knife in. Maybe. We could put that down. But what's he really doing with it? Oh, he's scooping out. Okay, so he sticks the knife in. We could put that down. And then he scoops out the peanut butter. Sure. Lots of details in that sentence. Then what's he do? He spreads it. Spreads it. Spreads the peanut butter. Where? On just one slice. That's what he does. And then what's he do? He puts the other slice on top. And that just finishes it off, right? Okay, so now I know you're dying to tell me the inference. Just wait a minute. There's some thinking that you can do if you group these things together. Seriously, I know. It seems like it's too easy. If you have bread and a knife, then that makes us think that you're where? In the kitchen. Yeah, because sometimes when we're trying to figure out what somebody is doing, it's really helpful to know what room they're in, right? Like the doctor was coming into a little room. Like that location sometimes is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what somebody's doing. So they're in the kitchen. The knife and the bread kind of tells us that they're in the kitchen. And then he opens a jar, sticks the knife in, scoops out the peanut butter. It just, they all are kind of in one location already. We can kind of group them. It's a short passage. And so what is he doing? He's really getting something out. And so I wrote it in words and phrases, but the other thing that you can do that's really helpful when you're collecting details is sometimes you just draw a quick picture. Yeah, just a container, got the knife sticking in, PB for short, right? That's all. And then what else is he doing? The peanut butter on one slice, the other slice on top. And so when I think about that, I can almost visualize it. And that dark line, that's the peanut butter that's in the middle. So he spreads it on one slice. He puts the other on top. So I'm really seeing that peanut butter in the middle. And of course, what's he doing? Making a sandwich, a peanut butter sandwich, right? Not a peanut butter and jelly. We didn't hear anything about the jelly. Can't call it that, but he is making a sandwich of some sort. Okay, that was the easy part, really, was the inferring. We still have to go through the steps. I know, even though you could figure it out, it's good to go through the steps so that you have the routine. And now we're ready to write. So what's the sentence that we would write first? What sticky note do I need to pull off? The pink. That's right. You guys are good. The inference. That was the last thing to come in the reading, but it's the first thing to come in the writing. So I'm going to stick it back there. And what were the most crucial details? Go ahead. Look at the passage or look here at the chart. What were the most crucial details that really helped you figure out that he was making a sandwich. It could be the supplies. Yeah. The jar. But what about this part? Like what he's actually doing with the peanut butter. You think that? What he's actually doing with the peanut butter? And so he scoops it out, and then what's he do with the peanut butter? He spreads it on one slice, right? So he wasn't like just putting it on an apple, right? He wasn't just putting a blob of it on his plate so he could dip his apple in it. He wasn't putting it on a spoon and just eating it, right? Some people do that. He wasn't doing that. He was spreading it. So now I'm going to move this. And let's write our sentences. Oops. Better put it in the order in which he really made the sandwich. Okay. So now, what is he doing? I'm going to use a couple of words from the question. He is, what's he doing? Making a sandwich, right? Making a sandwich. Okay, see? Period. First sentence, done. So, how do we want to say this? Scoops out peanut butter. Can't just put that. You got to turn it into a thought. First, we could, you know what we need to say. Yes, you're right. I forgot it in the previous one. Oh, I'm so glad you told me. We need to let them know that this actually comes from the text. So remember these statements? The text states. The text also states. Some of that. Or the first example, the second example. Oh, you guys are good. You are good. You remember that. Okay, so let me get rid of this. In the text, he first scoops out peanut butter. Good, good, good. And you could actually say with a knife if you wanted to. You want to do that? Okay, well then, here, I'm going to actually get out some of my oopsie tape. I forgot about that earlier. I should have gotten that oopsie tape out when I made that mistake here. Okay, so first he scoops out the peanut butter with a knife. Good one. Now, is there anything that came directly from the text? Well, we want to show them that it came directly from the text. Scoops out peanut butter. Good. And knife. Yes, it does mention that. So we want to put quotation marks because it came directly from the text. Oh, man, you guys are getting so good at this. Okay, so now the other detail we have. Spreads peanut butter on one slice. So, in the text, he first scoops out peanut butter with a knife. Now what do we want to say? The second example, sure, we can do it. The second example from the text. Okay. What? Spreads it? Okay, well, let's put that down. The second example from the text states, he spreads the peanut butter on one slice of bread. Good, good, good. Okay, so he spreads the peanut butter on one slice of bread. All right, so all we needed really were those two details. Now, do you want, it does kind of sound kind of funny, doesn't it? So you just spread it on one slice of bread. I agree with you. I think we need to put something about the other slice on top. Yeah, the other slice on top. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't see that sticky note. It must have fallen off. But let's go ahead and put and adds a slice of bread on top. I like that. That does sound a little better. I agree with you because it just seemed like the sandwich wasn't finished, right? Okay, so now don't need a period there. We have a period there. And so he adds a slice of bread on top. That came from the text, okay? Adds, yeah, okay. So now let's go back to reread. Make sure we have 3 sentences. He is making a sandwich, period. That's our inference. This was not directly stated in the text, but it's what we thought of. In the text, he first scoops out peanut butter with a knife. Yeah, that makes sense. The second example from the text states he spreads the peanut butter on one slice of bread and adds a slice of bread on top. Yeah, that's exactly how you make a sandwich. All right, guys, you are doing so well. Almost took my anchor chart down with me. Okay, so you guys are doing so well that I've got a way for you to practice. So now, let's look at my screen. I've got a few more riddles like this, some easy passages, and I've also given you the anchor chart here so that you don't forget. You read and make the inferences. You read, collect details, see if you can do the middle part and put those details together, and definitely put your inference down here, okay? And then you're going to take your inference and you're going to write a sentence. And then you're going to use those green details that you chose out of the passage to be the other sentences of evidence to support, okay? So what I have here is a passage, and then I have lines. If you can print it out, print it out. If you can't, no worries. Just read it online, and then you'll practice the writing on other pieces of paper or something like that, okay? Now, you need an inference silhouette. And so I've given you some inference silhouettes where you can jot some of the words and phrases, not whole sentences. You never saw me writing whole sentences over here. It's just words and phrases. That's it. So go ahead, add those words and phrases. See if you can start to look for patterns or memories or relationships, things that go together, and then boom, put your inference, okay? So you'll actually go back and forth. You'll read, you'll do your inference silhouette, then you'll go back up and do your writing here or just on another piece of paper, okay? You can always just trace an inference silhouette. If you've got a plain piece of paper, you can trace it on the screen, okay? All right, 2 passages. And so try both of them if you can. If it's getting too hard, maybe ask someone to help you. It could be, a parent. It could be an adult. It could be another kid. Ask somebody to help you if you think it's too hard. But just remember the steps. I put the anchor chart here to remind you of the steps. That's what we're really practicing. And you have a second inference silhouette here to help you with the second passage. All right? Guys, we've learned so much in the last few lessons. This is what readers do. They work hard to make inferences, and then they have to tell somebody what their inference is. And they do that through their writing. So if you were in Mrs. McCullough's class, you can do the assignment I just explained, or your teacher might even have a better idea to have you practice reading, making inferences, and writing about those inferences.